This is TJ Holman, and for my persuasive speech, due to the news this week with the Giants and Eli being benched and that leading to the firing of Ben McAdoo, I figured we'd talk about Eli's better years and the Giants' better years, such as 2011 when they went to the Super Bowl and they beat the New England Patriots for a second time. That year was the best year Eli's ever had and one of the best years we've ever seen by a quarterback. But yet he didn't win the MVP. Aaron Rodgers won the MVP, and I do truthfully believe that Eli Manning was the rightful MVP that year. Background. Eli Manning, at the time, was coming off a pretty rough year. He had brand new receivers, such as Hakeem Nicks, who was a rookie that year. And in 2010, the Giants went 10-6. And they missed the playoffs by blowing the game to the Eagles, the Miracle of the Meadowlands, too, with Deshaun Jackson's late punt return. Eli had 25 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, not bad stats, but 27 interceptions. 13 of them coming off of his receivers' hands by not knowing, new receivers such as Mario Manningham and Hakeem Nicks. Take away those 14 or 13 interceptions, you have 25 touchdowns, 4,000 yards, and around 10 interceptions, one of his best years. But yet, the dialogue wasn't so good. At the time, he was one-time Super Bowl champ. It wasn't looking so good for Coughlin and Eli, and they might have been shown the door if they failed the next year. On the other hand, you have Aaron Rodgers. The Packers at the time, before 2010, were seen as a talented up-and-coming team with good talent such as Jordy Nelson, Donald Driver, and a legendary receiver in Greg Jennings. Rodgers was the backup to Brett Favre. They were a successful team the year before, winning the Super Bowl. Rodgers was a Super Bowl MVP and looked to be the best quarterback historically of all time. Now, in 2011, we looked at a different perception. In 2011, the Giants finished 9-7, winning the NFC East. The Giants won the NFC East strongly off the strength of Eli Manning. Eli Manning set a record that year for 15 fourth-quarter touchdowns. That record was broken last week by Russell Wilson this year with 16. That held up for 5 years, 15 fourth-quarter touchdowns. He had 4,900 yards. He had 29 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. This was behind the 32nd ranked rushing attack and the 30th ranked defense. Out of the 9 wins he had, 8 were fourth-quarter comebacks. The only win they had that wasn't a fourth-quarter comeback was against Dallas to secure their spot into the playoffs as the NFC East winner. Rodgers, on the other hand, had an easy year. He went 45 touchdowns with 6 interceptions, the highest record for quarterback or touchdown-interception ratio. Rodgers was purely ahead of the game and was officially the offensive player of the year and won the MVP. Rodgers' team went 15-1 and almost lost to the Giants in the regular season. But if we're looking at it from a baseball standpoint, which wins above replacement are calculated, Rodgers' wins above replacement was only 5 behind Matt Flynn. Eli's wins above replacement standpoint was 9. He was 9 wins above his backup level. Without the Giants, they go if he got hurt, they would go 0-16. He was truly the most valuable player on that team. His Pro Football Focus stats were 88.8, the highest of his career. Rodgers was 80.2. Pro Football Focus watches every game, watches every snap, and grades each player accordingly. Again, we talk about the supporting cast and such like that. Rodgers had Jordy Nelson, who was a top 10 receiver the year before and a top 10 receiver in 2011. He also had Greg Jennings, and he had Donald Driver, who just won his first Super Bowl and was coming off of an injury-plagued year, but still had a great year. Nelson led the team and the league in touchdowns, and Jennings came in 3rd in yardage. He also had a good running back core of Ryan Grant, himself, and John Kuhn. They were the best offense in the league, and despite having the 32nd ranked defense, they had the 14th rushing attack in the league. So they were still pretty well balanced despite not having a great defense. A lot of their defensive yards came in blowouts. where they would beat teams 45-20, and they would just gain garbage time yards. Eli Manning had the worst offensive line in the league, with only one drafted player, Chris Snee, on the line. He had an undrafted rookie free agent, Victor Cruz, who no one heard of before that year. He had Hakeem Nicks, who pretty much fell off after 2011, not this year. And then he had Mario Manningham, who, secured the greatest catch in Super Bowl history, but still wasn't anything close to Jordy Nelson or Donald Driver. Eli Manning did so much more with so much less. As you see, despite the regular season record, the Packers 15-1 and the Giants being 9-7, Eli beat Rodgers in the playoffs and went on to the Super Bowl and beat Tom Brady. Now, the playoffs don't factor in regular season MVP voting, but if you're going to look at it from this standpoint where I'm arguing, you have to factor in the fact that Eli outplayed Rodgers both times in that year. At the regular season game, Rodgers won the game on a late-minute field goal, but Eli led the fourth quarter comeback, throwing 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and bringing them within a minute and 5 seconds before beating the undefeated Packers at that time. Though about 2 weeks later, he beat the Packers in the playoffs, beating them 34-20, and simply outplayed Rodgers, throwing 4 touchdowns, and Rodgers won. The week after, Eli, played a game of his life against the NFC Championship round against the 49ers, and won that game as well, and then won the Super Bowl against Tom Brady. Rodgers has yet to been back to the NFC Championship game and win it. He hasn't been back to the Super Bowl either. Rodgers has been known to choke in the playoffs and has the most playoff losses by any Packers quarterback. And that's the end of the slideshow. So, any questions?
I didn't think of the slides.
Do you think that, so you're saying that Aaron Rodgers only got the stats because of people around him?
Essentially, yes. Eli was truly the most valuable player to his team. He led the league in wins above replacement and had the highest quarterback rating in Pro Football Focus. Rodgers had a great year and is a great talent, but he was clearly the offensive player of the year, not the most valuable player. Yes.
Rodgers has not been back to the NFC Championship game
And won.
or the Super Bowl.
Has not been to the Super Bowl and won since 2010.
But Manning hasn't since 2011.
Yes, but Eli has made the playoffs since then.
So is Rodgers.
But Rodgers hasn't had as much success as Eli in career-wise.
Didn't Rodgers beat you guys last year?
He
in the
did,
playoffs?
but
Wasn't
again,
that the NFC East?
that was for the divisional round. Rodgers won that game, but only threw 1 touchdown. Eli, yet again, outplayed him with 2. Any other questions? Yes.
How about the Mingles?
All right, you got it.
Shouldn't Peyton Manning have been MVP of the Colts the year he was hurt?
That was that year. You can argue that too.
So my argument is that Peyton Manning should have been the MVP that year because the year before they were 14-2,
They were 12
and
before that year.
and the year he was hurt.
They were 2-14. Yes, you can make that argument, but you have to play to be considered for the MVP.
Okay.